That one? I'll take this one. It must be.
All right, glad to be here today and talk a little bit about sustainability. And we're going to talk about from ideology to ROI, and it's reframing sustainability for business leaders. We're going to talk a little bit about the hidden constraints and how they impact our results. Okay, the paradox. In today's world, we've got more commitments than ever on sustainability. We have more sustainable projects. We have more messaging, but many times that hasn't always translated to larger impact. It has just been um, something that maybe we see a lot of things going, but did we really put a dent in the problems we're trying to solve? So, common observations is often the highest impact work, often is under prioritized, and that's meaning the ones that have the stronger ROI. Many times, efficiency is overvalued. And I'll give you an example on that. My brother always buys the most efficient appliances for his home, and he always complains that I don't always buy the most efficient for mine. So if you want to show the numbers, my house is 1,100 square foot, his is 6,000. So efficiency doesn't matter if the scale is too large. Um, Visibility driving decisions. So many times, decisions that we're making often are how they look and a little bit less on how the impact is. And we have to watch that. Many times, ideology can overcome data. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And some of those things can result, if not done correctly, in the loss of public support. So it's not a failure of intent. And we all want good results. We all want to see um, great outcomes on our impact for sustainability. But sometimes we get caught up in a mode where we're buying into a story sometimes more than really understand the hardcore results. Um, and outcomes are always going to follow incentives, but those incentives, um, your results in terms of your impact may not be the same as outcome. In other words, you could have an incentive and your outcome could be either positive or negative, but your impact does not necessarily is this, doesn't necessarily follow the outcome, but it will, your incentives are going to be what drives things. So three incentive factors I see in a lot of sustainability projects. We have economics, ROI, how much money we saved, how um, efficient something is. Did we really make a dent on conservation? We have signaling. That's a lot of the marketing elements. It's the um, narrative that we want to tell, brand, marketing for our organizations because we want people to know that we're doing, the right things from a sustainability standpoint. Then we got political, which can be alignment that we may try to align with. Maybe we need to get some types of grants or other things. But that same organization can put pressure on you in one way or another too. And that's really a virtue of a lot of the 50-50 splits that we have in today's world. So when someone gets 51 and they tell you what to do, when you get 51, you tell them what to do. But so the systems though aren't aligned. So each of these optimize different outcomes. And so that's one of the problems right there. You have things when they're not aligned that optimize different outcomes, even often using the same exact data sets. So what each system rewards, the financial one's probably the most concrete and understandable. If we do something and it's sustainable, we save money, reduce energy, reduce cost. That's pretty measurable. The signaling ones, and I don't want to understate the value of those can actually persuade people to take different actions. They can, if you're a company, it can have an impact for people that want to do business with you. A lot of benefits in that. And political, many times, you know, politics politics can be an interesting thing because you can have a symbolic commitment from politics. And the example I use is you take a state government, for example, and you have maybe one view at the federal level, different view at the state level. Um, I've never run into a state government that hasn't been willing to take federal money most of the time for the things that are available. And so, if you've got money for sustainability and it's a state that really is not that interested in it, they'll take your money for sustainability. And so many times those things don't line up. So the core problem is that I think economic impact is very important because those can be reinvested, just like your compound interest rate, how it impacts your savings portfolios, things like that. Because if you earn money on that, you can reinvest it, and it's only going to get you where you want faster on the impact. Many decisions, though, can often underweigh financial viability, and basically, when you don't have that, it sometimes makes it harder for us to get projects approved, and it makes it a little bit more difficult for us to get the kind of impact that we want. So, why does high ROI projects, why are they sometimes undervalued? Well, they're hard to see, just like the iceberg we have here. A lot of it's below the field of vision, and you're not going to see them, so they're not as exciting. But they're very important, but they just aren't seen. They're hard to differentiate, and sometimes they're hard to really. There's trade-offs. So, has anyone ever addressed sustainability from the standpoint of behavioral change? Well, to me, that's one of the hardest pieces in sustainability is because you're asking a person to make a trade-off. You're wanting their behavior to change, and they're like, "Why should I do that?" And so, what we realize is that many times um, we may sometimes go to the easier than the harder work of dealing with the difficult. So what fills the gaps? Sometimes, visibility driven types of programs. It can be marginal projects that maybe someone wants to label as more sustainable, but it really doesn't have that big of an impact. And then, politically driven commitments. I'm doing this because I think it will enable me in some way to receive more funding. So these incentives persist because our reputation is important. It is important if you're a company um, to make sure you have that right image for your brand. So I don't want to underestimate that. Politics are always going to exist in one form or another. There's no escaping that from any place or point in history or society. That's always been there. But prioritization of the incentives is the most important. And so as we go into these next steps, what I wanted to hit is important point, I think, is that uh, each organization is going to have its own DNA, and each place or region that you live, it's going to have its own sets of things. And so it's not about me saying what is right or what is wrong about what any group is doing, because it really is all local what you're doing. Now, yes, things are connected. Yes, we have a connection within the world, but we're really talking about the fact that as we look at how to get things done, if it gets too ideological, it's hard to get past that and get down to the details of what we need to do. So the leadership question is, what incentives most drive your organization, economic signaling, um, or politics? And I want to use an example on this. We just recently did our climate action plan for Georgia Tech, and it is a very, very ambitious climate action plan. And I remember my AVP of sustainability was telling me, well, Georgia's got more of a conservative government. Should we rename it and not call it Climate Action Plan? And I would say, well, no, because we built this plan to be very financially viable and very supportable. Now, if it was a fluff plan that we had put together, I would say, maybe we shouldn't talk about it or call it something else. So I think the point is, if you put together solid plans that are designed to be able to explain to people who may have a different view that you may have on sustainability, you should go forward with these things, but build them in a way and with the confidence that you can get the support you need down the road. And we're going to talk about some elements of that in a little bit, but I think that's a really important point. So, first test of credibility that I've found is many organizations have not always exhausted their projects that do have good paybacks. Many times they're not as exciting. Their energy efficiency upgrades, their things that we talked about with my brother in his house. Maybe we don't have to have as many square footage in operation. Maybe we could change some standards and put more people in the same space. If you don't have a space, then you don't really have a lot of usage, and your sustainability is a lot better if you don't have it. Um, and so I think though these are also easier to sell because it's got proven results, financial savings, all the things that, particularly on the for-profit side, make a difference. So I also say make your differences visible. And by that, I'm saying if you separate your economic and your signaling and your politics from three different areas, I think it's really important that you understand those three areas. The reason I'm saying that, that's going to bring you clarity, and the clarity is going to help you better explain and educate other people on how it works. And it's all about being honest about the problem we're trying to solve. Um, for example, if the problem that we're trying to solve is truly, um, financial is the lead, put a higher percentage of effort on that in your plan. But don't call something different than what it is, because the minute you try to put it forward, you're going to have a lot of pushback in those areas. Because and the whole intent of what I'm doing today is trying to show everyone how you can get much higher percent support for projects that will carry you through regardless of what different changes happen within your organization. So as we make the trade-offs explicit, we're going to talk a little bit about um, this electrification part of my district energy plan at Georgia Tech. I had someone fairly high up in Georgia Power who sells electricity tell me that they didn't really support electrification, plans of like what I'd support put together. But when you, it was a short conversation and I didn't get the chance to explain the whole thing. But what we're doing is we use steam to heat buildings, and we don't want to use steam to heat buildings. If we can eliminate the steam, we eliminate scope one emissions. And, you know, but to do district energy on a campus-wide scale, these are large plants to where we heat or cool multiple buildings out of a variety of different plants. It's pretty much it's going to be three, $400 million easy to do that. And I've got to dig up the campus and put the new pipe in, and all for a project that is going to have $5 to $6 million a year in annual savings. Well, that's not going to fly on ROI, is it? And it's the core of my climate action plan, which I just told you was already, people might question why we would have that. But it's about timing on this. And so I understood and looked at the system on timing. My steam system's at the end of life. I've got to replace it anyway. And if I look at timing it with the times that I've got to replace that system, the difference between what I'm going to have to spend to replace that system or completely change the game and go to a more modern thing is about 20%. And my $5 to $6 million of energy savings will cover my incremental cost. And so that's what I'm. So when I put my plan together, this is, if you want to be a sustainable person, you can say, look, it's electrification. Yay, electrification. If you are a capital planning person or state finance things, oh, look, well, for the incremental cost we're spending here, this is a deferred renewal project. This isn't sustainability. But everybody gets the piece of what they want because I've got the timing aligned and I've got the messaging aligned, and how it all works together. So I think that's a very important piece that sometimes is missed in planning. It's longer range planning, it's the timing of the projects, it's the making sure that we're bringing in 60, 70, 80% of the stakeholders involved so that when things change, I'm not going back and forth between um, people radically wanting to change the plan. The so I'm saying reorder the system a bit. I think you should always lead in with economics. I think that we the signaling piece to share results, and I think it also works great for explaining to the community what we're doing is always a good thing, and political alignment. But I've got political alignment on the least of these because that's going to change a lot. And I think if you address the first one and to some degree the second, you're going to be in a lot better shape. So, why do I think this works? Um, well, one, I think that a solid plan that really gains acceptance over a larger group of people, that solid plan is going to give you credibility, and that credibility increases your support. When when you reduce the resistance against your project, that's going to increase support. And then the capital starts aligning. And that's what we need, the capital to do these projects. And the capital is rarely just our money. It's is often, if it's on state, on government side, it's someone else's money. If it's rebates, it's someone else's money. And then the impact scales because there are tangible, sustainable, and durable results. And I'll use my final example is was involved in one of the largest solar installations in the Tallahassee area. We agreed to subscribe to a certain, 40 million kilowatt hours a year. Um, it had a small gap, which about a third of that gap was gone of about $200,000 a year of incremental power we're going to do. That was what the Institute said was worth it to them to have that. It was at a time when the governor of Florida said, we will not even allow the word climate change to be used in state government. So, how did I get all these things to flow through? It's because the way the contract was set up, I had a fixed energy cost for just the solar, and we looked at that the same way as you would if it were natural gas. And then we ran a forward fuel purchasing contract, and no one supported it from a sustainability standpoint so much on the state level, but they did support it as a financial hedge and so a lot of times it's how you put it together, and it gave everybody what they needed. So there are innovative ways to solve these problems, and I would, look forward to some of those discussions later today to discuss them. But just like engineering, everything is unique for each case. And in closing, sustainability isn't impractical. It isn't impactful when our outcomes are not prioritized. Leadership determines priority, and together we can build this broader coalition that we need to continue to increase sustainability. So it's all doable. It's all, but we're talking about increasing the number of executable projects we have by bringing and meeting the needs of an ever growing and larger group of stakeholders. And that's essentially what I have today. So.